Hello and welcome back to the From My Perspective podcast, where I, Jackson McCarty, tell you all the names you need to know in the college football landscape that could be changing the football landscape in the very near future. So today we've got the same old with one half of it, but we're trying something else, kind of a balance to what the last episode was in Icarus teams, and I'll explain that concept a little bit later on. But first, we're going to lead off with my predictions for Week 4. Before we jump into any of that, make sure to hit subscribe. It helps me out a ton. I'm just trying to grow the channel. So as far as Week 4 goes, the college football season at this point has been very, very strange. A lot of teams that we didn't expect to be really good have churned out 3-0 turnouts to this point. All the basketball schools, I'm looking at you. And on the flip side of that, Alabama almost lost to Texas. Notre Dame started off 0-2. Like, some of those more traditional schools that you're more inclined to believe in have not done so well. So to this point, I've also not done great with my predictions because of this, but hopefully this kind of starts to be the foundation of a big turnaround for me. We'll have to see. The first prediction I'm kind of putting my eggs in the basket of is Notre Dame, who I just mentioned. They got off to a cold start. They're now 1-2 after beating Cal last week. I think they break up North Carolina's undefeated year to this point. Things are certainly not perfect in South Bend. I'll be the first to admit that. I'm not personally a Notre Dame fan, but I did expect them to be better than this. There are finally some things to hope for this year to this point in the season, or things that give you a little bit of optimism. First, the defense is good. Holding Ohio State to 21 shows their peak. They haven't allowed 30 to anyone yet. They rank 33rd in passing yards allowed, which just so happens to be the focal point of the Tar Heels offense right now. Drake May has kind of been leading the charge for North Carolina, and they boast the 21st best passing yards per game. Both teams will lower the other standing. I'm going to say that just kind of cancels out. North Carolina is 118th in the country on total yards allowed, while Notre Dame is 115th on offensive yards per game. That just is also just gross, but I think that a bad offense versus a bad defense is a better outcome than a good offense versus a good defense for most teams. You know what I mean? Like, if you have a bad offense, going up against a bad defense makes you feel a whole lot better than a really good offense does going up against the Alabamas of the world. So I think it'll be a close game, but I think the win versus Cal is going to give Notre Dame some confidence, which I believe will be a huge boost to the team as they roll in here and eventually knock off the Tar Heels. So looking at that game, I do think North Carolina is, kind of shaky. App State really let them have it in the fourth quarter. We know that they're not just awesome, that they're a good team, and they'll continue to be good. They'll probably finish around 7 wins, 8 wins, something like that. But the 3-0 start certainly wasn't what I was expecting. So I think Notre Dame will kind of start to derail that. Something I was expecting, though, and something that you can go back to my predictions for the season, like before the season even started, to prove this, I said the Tennessee Volunteers are going to be a good team, and to this point, that looks like a very strong positive thing that I have predicted correctly. Now, we are early on in the year, but so far, I'm looking pretty good on that. I think they go ahead and they play Florida this week. I think they get their second-ranked win of the year. There's no reason for me to stop being a Tennessee guy when all they've done is prove me right to this point. And Florida, who I was not super high on coming into the season, we're now starting to see some cracks in their game. We've seen Anthony Richardson falter. We haven't seen that from Hendon Hooker yet. Most importantly, we've seen Florida go into deep waters with every single team that they've played so far. It doesn't matter who it is. They barely beat USF. Utah was one play short of a win against them. Kentucky kept their offense at bay. The offense just didn't look great for Kentucky in that game, but they did manage to pull out the win. I think Tennessee just comes out here and flat out overwhelms them. I'm saying that the running game is going to be the driving point here because Florida, to this point, lets up a lot of yards on the ground. That's not been something they've been strong at stopping yet. I think Tennessee comes through, leads the charge with their backs, and then Hendon Hooker is just that cherry on top, that nail in the coffin, that thing that makes sure that Florida cannot come back from what Tennessee brings on offense. So, that's 2 SEC matchups, a really prime SEC matchup to look at, but there is absolutely another game within the SEC, another ranked versus ranked game there between Arkansas and A&M that I'd love to talk about. Firstly, Arkansas is another one of those teams that I've been pretty high on as the season progressed. I said that they would finish around, that 15 to 20. I don't remember what the number was exactly. I think maybe 17. But I said they were going to be pretty solid, and they've proven that they are at least capable of playing enough like a team to beat some really talented programs in the country. I think A&M will be the next one on there, as their quarterback play really really holds them back and ultimately leads to an Arkansas victory. Arkansas's defense is dead last right now in pass yards allowed per game, which should provide some hope for the Aggies. The issue is their quarterback play has been awful. I mean, just flat out bad. And Arkansas is 7th in the land in rush yards per game, so that means A-Chain and their run game probably won't get a whole lot going. They got some big boys in the trenches, Arkansas does, so I think that shuts them down, and they have to rely on the quarterback, which, with anything that we've seen to this point in the season, is a good foundation and kind of proves that they're not ready to roll out with their quarterback. They've already put their second one out there. Max Johnson didn't just look stellar. Last game, he looked like a game manager. Game managers don't really push you over the top and help you win big. So I think the Aggies take another loss would mathematically eliminate them from the college football playoffs more likely than not, unless the whole season just goes, like crazy going into the playoffs. But I do think they take their second loss and fall out of the top 25. We move from the SEC now. We're going out to the Pac-12, where Oregon, a team that I have not been high on since week one because of well, quite frankly, they made me look like an idiot because of the prediction between Georgia and Oregon. I said Oregon would keep it close. I don't really have that much more faith in Bo Nix. I don't know that the new head coach is really ready to take this team to a consistent high level, especially not early in his head coaching career. So they've got Washington State across from them this week, and I think that Washington State actually upsets them with a superstar-making performance by one Mr. Cameron Ward. Cam Ward's jump from Incarnate Word has gone very well so far, at least in my opinion. Over 700 yards, 8 touchdowns, he's 3-0. Washington State is operating well with the quarterback that used to be at Incarnate Word. Against good quarterbacks, Oregon has not looked just great. And I'm qualifying Stetson Bennett, who I don't just love, but I do think he is a top, 1/3 quarterback in college football this year. And then obviously you've got Jaron Hall. Oregon has allowed 673 yards and 4 passing touchdowns to those two combined, which shows that their passing offense, whenever they have to go up against a strong quarterback in the pocket, doesn't really work out for them too well. Ward's not immobile. That should help a little bit. I think Washington State has found their groove. I do think it'll probably come crashing down on them eventually. But for the time being, I think that will aid them against Oregon, a team that does not look like it has a good pass defense. And I think that they do inevitably push over the top and get the victory there. So the last one, and if you've been following along with these, I like to have somebody crushes someone else in every single one of these, just because I find them fun, and because I do think there are a lot of college football blowouts, and especially within the ranked teams. We're going with a ranked versus ranked matchup here, Clemson versus Wake Forest. I mentioned Wake Forest. I don't really believe in them being a ranked team. I think they're a little bit too much of a one-man band to be as high up in the country as they are currently. I think Clemson comes in there and absolutely just rolls them. So Sam Hartman, as good as I do think he is, and I think that he is kind of the saving grace for Wake Forest right now, there's way too much that Clemson has, especially in that front seven. I don't see that I don't see it working out well for them. Last episode, I talked about Wake being limited in what they can do beyond Sam Hartman. This is as simple as one team can attack from all points, while the other one only has one real super strength, one thing that they can rely on. And I don't know that whenever you go up against such a talented team like Clemson is, how well that's going to work out for you. So those are my predictions. As always, next Tuesday, I'll have a podcast released, and we'll go over my thoughts from that week and how I did as a whole. But that's kind of put that on the shelf for now. We've got a couple more days until college football really kicks up. So I want to look at the season as a whole and how there have been a few teams, like I mentioned at the beginning, that are performing above expectations, performing very much higher above expectations for some of these schools, and why I think that they are Icarus teams. So if you don't know the story of Icarus, His dad, I believe, I don't know the story just 100%, but he ended up with wings and he was flying and he flew too close to the sun and the glue that holds the wings together melted and he came crashing down. I think a lot of these teams are flying, really high, just testing how far up they can go. And I think a lot of these guys are more likely than not going to see their wings melt and to, inevitably come back down to earth. The first team right now that I want to focus on was kind of the driver for, being an Icarus team, kind of helped me come up with this concept, the Texas Longhorns. I thought the parade routes were going to be starting up and that everybody in Austin was going to be lined up ringing the cowbells because they lost by 1 point to Alabama, in which, by the way, awesome. That's great. But, if that is the benchmark for how great your season's going, you're probably not going to stay up way too high for very long. Quinn Ewers coming back does kind of hurt my claim to them being an Icarus team. Being completely honest, I think Quinn Ewers is going to be a good quarterback. I think that he'll end up getting the start this year whenever he gets back healthy, and then he'll get next year as well while they try to get Arch figured out. But and he could absolutely help them avoid the Icarus tag long term. The schedule is the difficult part. As early as this upcoming week, Texas Tech, I predicted that they were going to upset somebody. I don't remember who they played last week, but I predicted them to be a team that could cause an upset, and they're always one of those teams that could cause an upset. They could cause them some issues this week. West Virginia has turnaround potential. OU, Oklahoma State, Baylor, they're all very, very good. So Texas will have to run that gauntlet, if you will, very soon within their own conference, and I just don't love the outlook for them personally. Maybe they can overcome Texas Tech being who they are, and maybe Neil Brown doesn't figure it out and they sneak out a win against OU or Oklahoma State or Baylor, whoever it is. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and say I don't really think that Texas will be anything more than an 8-win team, which is what I predicted them at the beginning of the season. But right now, after almost beating Alabama, you're getting a lot of more praise towards them than I believe they probably should be getting, at least for the time being. The next team I want to talk about resides out in the Pac-12, and it's a little bit based around their quarterback too, because I personally didn't know this kid had it in him. He's a recent transfer, and way back whenever I started these videos, I did a most underrated transfers list thing, and I looked at this guy and was like, it could work out fine. I don't really see him having just a ton of upside or a ton of, really change a program and make them really good. But Michael Penix Jr. has absolutely done that at Washington. I just don't think that it's super sustainable. Kudos to him. Like I said, I did not think he had that kind of juice to be this good. I remember him from the pylon dive at Indiana and, thinking that he could be something kind of nice, but having to transfer to Washington, going with a new coach in Kalen DeBoer, I didn't have a whole lot of confidence, but when you can put up a stat line like that against Michigan State, you deserve a little bit of respect. Similar to my issues with Wake, though, it feels unsustainable trying to just operate with Penix, especially when I don't love the teams that they've played outside of Michigan State. You've got Portland State that they beat up on. You got Kent State that they beat up on. They're really 1-0 whenever it boils down to games that matter. I think that at the end of the day, you have to have more layers than Washington currently presents to me. And, I'm not holding out faith for them to start developing all these other nuances and really improving on the defensive side of things. I need to see them play more defensive, I need to see their defense show more against higher competition. I don't love Michigan State's offense, so I'm not really sold by that performance either. I just don't see them sticking around in that upper echelon of college football, especially as they are right now. I believe they're a ranked team at 3-0, so you never know. I'm not buying into this one. Another team that I don't love completely the makeup of, and it's not really a one-man band situation. You can kind of view that with their running back, but I think that overall, and you've seen this throughout history, their ceiling and their floor are really close together, but right now it feels like they're flying above what their typically presented ceiling is. The Minnesota Gophers, I don't see a lot that I love with this team outside of Mohamed Ibrahim. They've got Tanner Morgan, who has been around forever. He knows what needs to happen for a team to be good. I just don't know that he is capable of being the quarterback that kind of, puts that on track, if you will. And right now, they're 3-0, but You look at the schedule, their 3 wins come from Western Illinois, New Mexico State, and Colorado. It's just not particularly great to look at. Their immediate future holds Michigan State, Purdue, Illinois, Penn State. You can give me 1-3 in that run. And it's weird because while, yes, I don't think Minnesota rather, is that particularly great of a team, they're one of the few Icarus teams that I could absolutely, being at the bare minimum competitive in their division within their conference, because that's just how weak that side of the Big Ten is right now. So the Gophers, I think, will start to fall off a little bit, probably finish around that 7-8 win mark. And that's not to discredit PJ Fleck. I think that he is a good coach, but with how everything's made up right now, I just don't really see the Minnesota team being one that continues this run of strength. Another team that has just blown my mind on the ability to get to 3-0. It's because they're not really a school that you see a lot of great things happening from their football team, at least in recent history. They've put out plenty of good guys in the NFL prior, quite a few years ago now. But Syracuse getting to 3-0 is a shocker to me, and is absolutely not anything I can imagine staying pat for staying in this realm of possibility. As genuinely cool as it is to see the Orange run off wins against Louisville and Purdue, it can't last, right? Like, it's Syracuse, and it's not. Rome wasn't built in a day. Like, if Syracuse comes back and becomes a great football program down the line, awesome. But I can't imagine them turning it around from last year and then immediately becoming somebody to actually watch for in the ACC, especially when you have to play SEC teams ACC. They have to play Virginia this upcoming week. That's not an easy team to beat. Brennan Armstrong is always capable of coming out there. It's kind of like Purdue. If they have to get into the mud like they did against Purdue with Aiden O'Connell, is that going to be enough to do it 2 weeks in a row? And then after that, you've got NC State, Clemson, Notre Dame, Pitt all on the schedule, not immediately after Virginia, but you do have to face that run eventually. Sean Tucker will continue to be fun. I like the running back. The season will definitely be better than they expected, 7-6 wins, somewhere like that. But, only picking up 3 or 4 more wins in the rest of the season when we are so far early into the year, I think it sets you back, and that's absolutely kind of a fall from how hot you started. And, maybe this is the foundation point for Syracuse to move up. I think that this will still be a positive for them, despite being on this list. I just don't think that it's sustainable. Through and through, I don't think they have the roster to compete in the ACC. Simple as that. And then the final team I want to talk about, we're going to the SEC now, and the SEC is full of good football teams. It's hard to say that any one program is going to have a super fall from grace that hasn't already. Florida had their rise and already had their fall. A&M is certainly falling right now. I guess you could maybe make a case for Arkansas, but I think that they'll still, again, finish probably higher than what I had initially predicted, somewhere in that 12 to 15, 16 range. I'm going to go with Ole Miss because, quite frankly, I don't think they have the quarterback to keep up in the conference. While I like Jackson Dart long term, it has not just been great at Ole Miss. He has not looked the part out there, as a Rebel. It has not been what you need. The running backs are great, but I don't know that just running backs right now is enough to compete with the SEC. And, to get to 3-0 is awesome. But University of Central Arkansas, Georgia Tech, and Troy being those 3 teams, it's not pretty. You have to jump into the SEC. You've got one more game out of schedule against Tulsa. I think it'll be a rude awakening because, simply put, I don't know that the defense has enough juice to keep up with the offenses like Georgia and Alabama, maybe even Arkansas, because they're great on the ground this year. And I don't think that the offense outside of the running group has enough to keep them in games where their defense might not be able to contain. So while I do, again, think Ole Miss will be good, I figure probably 8 wins-ish. Overall, they're not the cream of the crop in the SEC, in my opinion, and I think that they're set for a come down. So what do you think about the Icarus teams? What do you think about predictions? Do you have any more personally that you'd like to put in the comment section down below? Feel free to. Or get in my Twitter, rather. I'll leave those links down below. But for now, that is episode 35 of the From My Perspective podcast, and as always, I'll see you next time.